Hello, my name is Russell Myers, independent for U.S. President for 2024. So many of my previous policy proposals have detailed steps which I would take toward empowering workers. Such ideas, such as universal health care, go a long way in this regard. Endorsing a national union also goes a long way in empowering all Americans. Yet none of that is enough. Allowing decisions regarding wages, employment, and benefits to remain in the hands of corporations as they are currently structured still leave workers with less power than investors. Corporate executives and outside investors who hold the majority of stock detract from profits which would otherwise go into worker wages and benefits. These same people make decisions which are, more often than not, detrimental to workers. If we do not have democracy in the workplace, we do not have democracy. Consider that if a company is offered tax breaks in various forms, if they move their facilities to another geographic location, the company will frequently take that offer. The concerns of the workers at the previous location are not taken into account. If the company decides to move operations to another country or outsource production to another country, it is the workers who have no voice in that decision. In many cases, it is not only the direct workers facility who suffer, but the entire community. Drive across the U.S., and you will find many small communities that have become ghost towns because a corporation decided to abruptly halt all operations in that location. The company did not halt operations, they just moved. As a result, workers lose employment and benefits. Small businesses, including rural hospitals and clinics, which once depended on the workers with incomes and insurance, are then forced to also close. Residents are forced to leave the communities they may have grown up or raised their families in, leaving behind their friends, relatives, churches, just because they have no choice. They must relocate for mere survival. Obviously, changes happen in business cycles and technology. These changes can result in certain facilities and technologies becoming obsolete. However, workers have no word in whether the facility may be able to adapt to these changes versus closing down entirely. Imagine instead that you work for a company in which workers own all or at least the majority of shares of that company. Decisions are made by the workers in a democratic manner where each worker has a vote. None of that means they cannot hire competent management. It does not mean that market studies are not conducted before making changes or deciding to not make changes. It does not mean outside consultants cannot be hired. These are just reasonable business decisions. Yet, instead of the information from consultants and studies being handed over to investors, the information is first contracted by and then placed in the possession of the employees. The employees could elect a certain panel of co-workers to make these decisions, or they could vote directly on major decisions as a whole. Each worker would have the same risks involved in the results of these decisions. Everyone equally. In such a scenario, we can reason that a worker-owned company would make far different decisions on whether operations were going to be moved to another state or country rather than staying right where they are. The company would likely pay regular wages, but instead of paying dividends to investors in some other state, profits would be equally shared among the worker owners. Obviously, they would make decisions such as investing part of the profits back into the continued operations and growth of the company. They could negotiate better deals for insurance for the workers, contract for continuing education in-house, or with local colleges and universities for workers to improve their personal education. They may decide to invest in in-house child and even elderly care facilities as a business expense. Imagine being able to visit your child or elderly parent in the middle of the workday just because you wanted to. Some people may claim that such an arrangement would lead to lower profits and decreased productivity. In truth, logic would lead to the opposite conclusion. Workers fully invested as owners and recipients of an equal share of profits would be more motivated to be as productive as possible and reduce waste wherever they could. After all, they would not be accountable to some nameless, faceless consortium that has no concern for their well-being. They would be accountable to their co-workers, their friends, family members, and community in general, people that they have to look in the eye on a daily basis. It also seems to me that communities, municipalities, should be far more amenable to arrangements such as this. Worker-owned companies would not attempt to avoid paying taxes which support that very community. The workers themselves would want decent roads, good teachers, and elected officials that represent their interests instead of the interests of a corporation in an entirely different state or country. Those communities would not blindly poison their own land, air, and water for the sake of profit when they are the ones who would be poisoning themselves and their children. Simply put, the entire arrangement creates a cycle in which the business is concerned with the health of the community as a whole, while the general community would be concerned with the health of the business. Of course, none of this means a guarantee that a business would be successful. Bad decisions could be made. A company may delay making needed changes to their business model and suffer as a result. Even if it is worker-owned and managed, business is business. One of the biggest problems with such arrangements is that our economy, banking, and political systems are not set up to encourage and support these arrangements. Instead, our system is unquestionably arranged to benefit and favor the wealthiest in our society or even the wealthy outside of our society. Communities are not a concern. Most major corporations and even our laws function on the Friedman Chicago Business School model. Societal, community, and environmental concerns take last place. Milton Friedman said that a business that places society, community, or environment ahead of stockholder interests is guilty of treason. Henry Ford once tried reducing the price of his vehicles by half, so more people could afford his vehicles. This reduced corporate profits. He was sued and lost in federal court to his shareholders. The court held that his only concern should be to investors. There have been many, many cases over the years which went the same direction. Thus, business interests are in direct opposition to societal interests. It is time for this to change. To make such changes, I propose making changes which benefit small to medium-sized businesses and worker-owned cooperatives. Some of these changes would include legislation which allows for such companies to be immune from being accountable to outside investors regarding profit sharing and expenses which benefit the workers and community in which they reside. Another proposal would be significant federal funding for small to medium-sized business grants and federally guaranteed loans, with an emphasis on businesses and lower-income communities, including entrepreneurs actively residing in minority and low-income neighborhoods. This would extend to include groups of workers who collectively wish to establish or purchase larger businesses as long as that business met the definition of a worker-owned cooperative, including equal profit sharing for all workers. This program would offer lower interest rates on business loans for establishing or expanding operations. Beyond a certain profit margin, these businesses would still be subject to the same tax rate as other corporations, which would encourage more investment in the business itself. Such loans would be guaranteed only if they were funded by locally owned banks or credit unions. These programs would have certain requirements, including a majority of workers completing programs offered by the Small Business Administration. These grants and loans would not be offered blindly, but would have to meet examination for viability by the Small Business Administration and officials of the banks offering the loans. Some people will, of course, claim that these proposals amount to socialism. The reverse is true. Worker-owned businesses, by definition, make each worker owner a capitalist, rather than simply a wage slave with no power and no voice. This does not lead to the dismantling of capitalism. It expands capitalism, but in a more equitable and fair manner for all workers. It would benefit communities of all sizes in a direct manner. Rather obviously, this is a short, simplified version of what these plans would entail. Like many of my policy proposals, it would likely be difficult to get passed through Congress and would meet with significant resistance from Wall Street in the way of corporate media propaganda and lawsuits. However, as with all of my policy proposals, I am dedicated to fighting to see this become a reality. I believe this policy could very well see a lot of support across party lines from voters, no matter their affiliations aside from right-wing extremists. Within the parties, resistance would be most prevalent among those most beholden to corporate interests and who place those interests above all else, whether for workers or for capitalism itself. So it would require widespread and large-scale public support to achieve this. If I had such support, it would be very well worth the effort involved for all of us. Please share this article or video. Talk about these subjects. Understand that we do have options to the system that is currently in place, but I need your help in any way you can offer, including spreading awareness of this campaign. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this campaign. I hate asking for money, but it is the reality of a political campaign under our current system that money is necessary. Thank you for watching. Please share this video, talk about these subjects, talk about this campaign. Help me however you can. By helping me, you help yourself. And I make that an absolute promise. I don't use talking points. I make promises that I fully intend to back up. Thank you again. Have a good evening.